Part of our agenda today, we have the keynote speaker from Professor J.P. Kesan. Professor Kesan he is Director of Program of Intellectual Property and Technology Law at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He is also an electrical engineering graduate, as Mr. Ramanan was also from IIT Bombay. Mr. Kesan is an electrical engineering graduate from MNIT Surathkal, and as I'm told, he was a gold medalist when he did graduation. He did his PhD in electrical and computer science from University of Texas at Austin in the US. So he has received numerous external research grants and awards during his tenure, and he has worked in the area of patents, intellectual property, policy, cybersecurity, privacy regulations from the National Science Foundation, the Department of Homeland Security, the National Academy of Science, the US Department of Agriculture, the Energy Biosciences Institute, and there are many in the list. In fact, if I read his bio, it will take at least 15 minutes. But yes, another important thing is that Professor Kesan is a JSPS invited fellow at the University of Tokyo, Japan, and he is a visiting professor in the National Law University at New Delhi also. He is not only an academic and research person, he has also done practice in patent litigation and patent prosecution related things. So I think he has a 360-degree view about what IPR is. And because he knows the Indian ecosystem very well as the US ecosystem, and he is very well traveled and networked among various countries in the world, I think Professor J. Kesan is the right person to open up this topic, first of all, which again, I repeat, has three important dimensions. One is IPR, another is need of collaborative research, which is quite lacking in India. And in fact, many of us in academic feel that if we partner, our IP will be lost or our IP will be risk. And I think Professor Kesan is going to touch upon that critical aspect of IPR in India. And third is the pandemic, how this collaborative research can really help solve some problems in this COVID-19 and similar pandemic time. When we conceived of this event, he suggested that in his knowledge, there cannot be a better person than Professor J. Kesan to open the discussions and deliberations for this 5-day event. So with this brief introduction, I know Professor Kesan, your CV deserves much more time, but I would request you to kindly start your keynote address, please.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the MNIT management, Professor Mathur, my classmate Director Yaragati, and others for inviting me. I hope everyone is staying safe and being healthy in this really difficult time. I assure you that if it were not for this, I would have been there physically. I would have been present, and I would have really enjoyed seeing all the wonderful buildings of MIIC that they showed in the video, and it really would have been a great opportunity to visit everyone. So in a way, I'm sorry, but I'm still glad that we can talk about various things today. I want to share the screen with you so that I can show you some slides. This is a really terrific topic because we're talking about intellectual property rights. We're talking about the importance of collaboration, and we're talking about it in the context of COVID. Let's start by looking at the most exciting news from India. The most exciting news from India has been the development of this Covaxin. Yeah, so the whole idea here, of course, is another way of thinking about this is innovation through collaboration. And when I was preparing for this talk, I realized that one of the best examples is this Covaxin. Just think about India's indigenous COVID-19 vaccine. It is a collaboration. There's a private company, Bharat Biotech, that has collaborated with ICMR's National Institute of Virology. And so this is a public-private partnership that has resulted in tremendous innovation. An excellent example of this. And Bharat Biotech is collaborating with a US-based company, FluGen, and is also working with the University of Wisconsin in Madison. You can see in this small example, you have universities, you have national laboratories, you have the private sector, each one of them bringing different resources and bringing different competencies so you can actually develop and test on a large scale the vaccine. This is what we're talking about in terms of the power of collaboration. When I was again preparing for this talk, unfortunately, I received some sad news that my good friend, Dr. Ananda Chakrabarty, passed away at the age of 82 3 days ago. I mentioned this to you because Dr. Chakrabarty was the person whose research was involved in the famous 1980 US Supreme Court decision of Diamond versus Chakrabarty in 1980 that actually held for the first time that genetically modified organisms are patentable. You can get a patent for a genetically modified organism. And in this particular case, Dr. Chakrabarty had come up with some oil-eating bacteria. And he was trying to patent these oil-eating bacteria when he was a scientist working in the industry at GE. I mentioned Dr. Chakrabarty today because his whole life was embodied in the kind of work that we're talking about. I was honored to know him very well for over 2 decades. He's a brilliant man, but who also was an entrepreneur who started several biotech companies. He was always excited to talk about his science and research, but more importantly, he was interested in using his knowledge of how to genetically modify bacteria and so on, and how to develop biotech products from his innovations. In fact, he kept doing that right until the very end. I bring these 2 examples to you just to illustrate to you that we're really not trying to do anything that has simply not happened before. It is very much happening in India. It's happening all over the world. People are collaborating, making things happen, and that's what we're really talking about. Now, when we talk about this ecosystem, this innovation ecosystem, who are in this ecosystem? In this ecosystem, you have several important players. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the role of each of these players. You have faculty, you have students, you have the management and administration at various institutes, you have various companies, and of course you have the government in the middle playing an important role in trying to make all these people really come together and provide some critical resources that are needed. And this is true in the United States, this is true in Europe and Japan, and this is true in India too. Why do these people need to come together? They need to come together because they have different competencies. They have different resources. And in order to develop new innovation, they all need to bring those expertise together so that you can really push the frontiers of ignorance. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about pushing at the very edge of our knowledge in a particular area. Let's talk a little bit about each of them so that we can try and understand. Faculty are absolutely critical, and every faculty member needs to be a resource, and they need to be a resource for ideas. They need to conduct and guide research. And I mentioned relevant problems because hopefully they will work on things that companies in places like MIIC, problems that they have encountered, problems that they are facing in the real world. Faculty generally enjoy writing papers, giving talks, so it's normal to have some resistance and uncertainty. about this sort of collaborative paradigm. And it is going to take some effort for them to embrace this paradigm. And I will talk about various models in which faculty can engage that we have seen in the United States later on in the talk. But the point here is that generally there is an opportunity for faculty members to participate in whatever role and to whatever extent they're comfortable with. Some tend to be less involved, some tend to be more involved, and we'll talk about that. And it also requires faculty to understand the different parties, understand what the private sector wants, understand what the students want, and understand what is needed for them to get promoted in the eyes of the administration and so on. So it's important to understand the motivations of all these parties. Students, frankly, I wish I was a student in this era. Director Yaragati and I know there was no innovation or incubation center at MIIT Surathkal that I recall. I wish that I were a student during these times. My own personal experience with my students is some students are very book smart. They're very, very smart at studying and making good grades and doing well. Some of my other students may not be as book smart, but they're actually very smart in terms of doing real work, working in a lab, making things happen, working in a company, in a place like MIIC, and they shine in that practical environment. So this is a great opportunity for your students. They can learn what companies in the real world want. They get a chance to work while going to school on real world problems, and they get a real chance to show, okay, I can actually help you. I can be a valuable member of your team. I can actually contribute. Maybe you're not so happy that my grades are not the highest, but at the same time, you also have opportunities for your top students to really excel. I want to say a little bit about the role of management and administration here, because it's really important to understand that faculty might actually not be that keen on engaging in the type of research that may be needed by the private sector. They might actually enjoy trying to answer basic scientific questions. It is really up to the administration to make them realize that if you participate in a place like MIIC, if you do the work, then that counts towards your promotion. You will get credit for it. That counts towards your next raise and so on. And so it's really important for the administration to create the incentives for faculty. Similarly, for students, students need to realize that they can go work at a place like MIIC and get some internship, get some credits. Maybe there's some course credit, maybe there's some externship credit that they can get, so that, in fact, even students who are unsure, hey, is this going to be not very useful? Maybe even sort of, am I wasting time? You can give students a chance to experience and work in the Innovation and Incubation Center and get credit towards their degree. Allow them to get some real world experience and get some credits, get some course credits. Finally, the private sector, I have found in my experience, having worked closely with them in these kinds of settings, they are initially very enthusiastic and they want to come in. But very often, because of the demands and pressures to produce results, the private sector sometimes, it's easier for them to become impatient. And it's easier for them to say, oh, well, we tried and it didn't work. So in fact, it takes some effort for the companies to communicate what problems they're really facing in their particular market with respect to their particular products, and how places like MNIT can help them, and how they're actually building a long-term relationship and they're building a long-term collaboration. It's not just about this particular problem. This particular problem may or may not be solved, but in fact, there is some important resources that are going to come together and they can really help with the R&D in your company. The other really important thing I've noticed is companies very often think, I know all the problems in my industry. I fully understand it. And so I fully expect that I can solve all the problems myself. And in fact, if somebody else comes up with something, it's probably not good. It's not good because they don't really know what's going on. So they have to get out of this not invented here mindset. And if it is not invented here, it's not good. You know, so they have to kind of get out of that mindset. And it also requires that the companies think about sharing the rewards. In case there is some good innovation coming out of this MIIC, how can both the companies and how can MNIT and how can the faculty and how can the students benefit? How can they actually get the rewards? It cannot be that there's a significant amount of revenue that is captured by the companies, but nothing is shared with MNIT or nothing is shared with MIIC. And that is not a sustainable way. That is not a sustainable relationship. And of course, the government here, I won't say much about it, has an important role to play with all these four actors. And it is in this collaborative mode that IP plays a very important role. And Mr. Ramanan was exactly correct. IP allows all these players to benefit from this collaboration. Now, the IP might be in the form of a patent, it might be in the form of a trade secret, or it might be some software for which you have a copyright. It might actually be some material. It might be of some protein, or it might be a germplasm for which the private sector is providing that to some group of faculty or students to work on this. And they provide the raw materials, and then maybe there is some output. And the output might be data. The output might be analysis. The output might be a patent. The output might be some copyrighted software. And that then goes back and is licensed to the company. Now, maybe they jointly decide that they want to form another small new company where both MIIC and the company are both members of the new company. That's possible. And why would they do that? They might do that because they want to raise some money based on the technology, based on the IP. Maybe they can go and get some money and get some support to take the product to the next level. Or they might get a larger company to invest in this. For example, the testing of Covaxin over hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people is being undertaken by Bharat Biotech. So they're taking on the burden of testing this. The wonderful thing about IP is that it allows every player in the value chain to be rewarded. So for example, many people don't realize that when you buy a piece of software, or when you buy some drug, or when you buy, say, some genetically modified product, what you don't realize is when you pay 10 rupees or you pay $1 for something, because of the licensing system, there is 1 rupee, a few cents that goes to everybody who has contributed to that product. So when somebody goes and buys a smartphone, you don't realize that you're actually paying for a lot of the technologies that have been developed by various people. And some time back, I saw that there was a SEP patent for 5G from IIT Madras. So you don't realize that, in fact, therefore, when somebody buys a phone that is compatible with 5G technology, then there is a small amount, a small fraction of it that goes to the people who have worked on it. I fully understand that many faculty members, for them, IP is a bad word. They think IP is no good. Let me try and share with you my real world experience with IP. Yes, I have been an inventor on 20 US patents. I've worked as a scientist in the industry. I continue to work with startup companies in various technology sectors in the US and abroad. And there's one thing that is really important to understand about IP. IP is really about control. IP is about trying to choose who you want to share your technology with and under what terms. By that I mean, it is very common in the United States for the major technological universities, if you are a nonprofit organization and you are engaged in nonprofit work, you're not trying to make money. Universities will freely give their technology and say, here, take it. You don't need to give us anything. No royalty is needed. No payment is needed. Go ahead. However, if you are going to make some money based on my technology, and you're going to make $1, then please give me 5 cents. Because you are capitalizing on my contribution. I'm not saying I did all the work, but I did some critical work. So, maybe it's worth only 1 cent, maybe it's worth only half a cent, maybe it's worth 2 cents. But if you're going to make money, please give me a share because you are benefiting from this. And it's really about that control that I want to emphasize. Let me give you a COVID example of that. Let us look at this Open COVID Pledge. Please go to opencovidpledge.org. This is a group of companies that have come together. They have lots of patents and copyrights on software and other things that may be useful to diagnose and treat COVID-19. Look at what they have said in their website. It says, every open COVID license grants public worldwide permission to use this company that is committed to this pledge. Use my IP, but look at the indication of control. You can use my IP only for the purpose of diagnosing, preventing, containing, and treating COVID-19. That's it. So I think there's a real problem. There's a humanitarian worldwide crisis. So I want to give my IP to everyone. And I want to freely give it without having to negotiate anything or pay any royalty or any fee for any of my patents or copyrights. Tremendous. But notice, it doesn't say if you have developed some machine learning algorithm or you have some AI model that you have developed and that maybe you have some copyright or patent. Notice, it doesn't say you get it for any purpose other than COVID-19. An example of the control that I'm talking about. Yes, you get access to my patents and copyright, but only for this purpose. Let's look at the founding pledgers. These are the founding adopters of this pledge. Look at these companies. There's a whole list of them on the website. Notice most of these companies are contributing machine learning, data science, AI, these kinds of biostatistics, bioinformation analysis techniques. Their products has a lot of applications in a lot of settings. So they're perfectly happy to contribute to trying to treat COVID-19 and get the reputational benefit. They look like they are very concerned for a serious crisis. And it allows them to capitalize reputationally, and it allows them to show that they're sincere in trying to solve this problem. But what I found equally interesting was that there were very few biotech companies or vaccine developers in this who had signed on to this pledge. You don't see companies like Moderna or AstraZeneca that is working with Oxford in this group. Why? Because they believe that too much of their core work is related directly to COVID-19, and there's really no other application. So they're not incentivized to share their IP. Again, that's a decision that they have made, understanding that each company is trying to control the dissemination of its technology. Similarly, MNIT and MIIC can develop their own IP policy. They can develop their own IP strategy and focus on what makes sense in what circumstances. And it can allow them to fashion a policy even in a particular situation, even with a particular company. The advantage is that when you have IP, you actually can make these decisions. If you don't have IP and you simply put it out there, then you don't get to control. People might benefit from your research, but you don't get to benefit. And I think that's the important distinction. I want to talk a little bit about how important universities have been in the United States in the past few decades. There are whole new industries in IT that have come about because of university technologies. There are numerous examples. Google, the PageRank algorithm, was developed by Larry Page and Sergey Brin and so on, and they were students. Carnegie Mellon. There's numerous other examples. Same thing in the life sciences, in plant genomics, animal genomics, and in human genomics, in personalized medicine, synthetic biology, and in biologics. There are lots and lots of innovation coming from universities. It is not at all surprising that all over the world, the private sector, and particularly in the US, wants to work with research universities because they see a tremendous opportunity for them to come up with the next set of products, the next innovation, or simply to solve a persistent problem that they are encountering. Now, let me talk a little bit about faculty engagement models. Some faculty in the US have what I call a limited engagement model. What is a limited engagement model? They may develop the technology in their lab, and they are happy to try to get a patent or try to protect their software, and they're happy to license it. But they don't want to do much more than that. They want to continue to work in their labs. They want to continue to do whatever they're doing normally. And they don't want to work to see how their technology is being used by a company. And they don't really even care if the research they do is useful to somebody or not. they don't really focus on the outcome of the research. They're only interested in asking good, interesting questions. So in this model, they get research support, they protect the technology, and they give it to somebody else. They don't want to be involved. They don't want to continue to be involved in that company. They're happy if you give them 1%, 0.5% of royalties. They're happy to attend a few meetings and advice, but they really are happy being fundamentally faculty doing research in their lab. And this collaboration with the private sector is nice, but it's not really their main focus. There are faculty members, very distinguished faculty members, who might follow this model. There are others who are the other extreme. They focus on research that they believe is really important for a particular industry sector. They're even happy to form their own company with somebody else and become the chief technology officer or become the chief scientist, sometimes even a CEO of a startup. They understand that their research must be relevant. It must produce certain results. There must be certain goals in a certain period of time, and they don't mind that. They like that. They like operating in that mode. There's a lot of exposure, there is risk, but they like that. They are also happy to take some percentage ownership in the company together with the institute and so on. Some of them even might decide, I am going to take some leave of absence from the university. I'm going to leave for 1 or 2 years and go and work with this company. This sort of high risk, high reward model is also something that a number of faculty embrace in the US. It is not uncommon, and there are numerous examples of this also. And again, I want to caution you, it is not about whether a person is a good faculty member or not. There are good faculty members in both models. It's just much more a sort of a personal preference. And then you have some people who are somewhat in the middle, who will participate to a limited degree. They will do a little bit of consulting. They are even happy to get a small amount of rewards. And they're happy to even participate in the board of directors and so on, or in the board of advisors. But they don't want to, they want to keep their involvement limited and not proceed above a certain level. Now, I want to show you this data, which is collected from the Association of University Technology Managers in the US, autumn data, looking at about 572 institutions in the US. The reason why I bring this up is because I want to show you that even across a couple of decades, the yellow bars are industry funding for these institutions, and the light brown bars are government federal funding. And so I want you to see that government funding is still very important and still very dominant. So the government plays a very important role. Even though the private companies, and we're the 73 companies that are involved and so on, it's great. They may have some support from bigger companies, that's great. But really, the central government has an important role to play in research funding and is in fact a major funder of research that then gets used and is used by companies and creates jobs, so that the federal government understands that economic development is based on their funding. In other words, we invest in these collaborations and they result in jobs, and they result in high quality, high-tech jobs that pay well, and that allows you to take advantage of the demographic dividend in India that Mr. Ramanan was talking about. So in short, I want you to think about this as an innovation ecosystem where collaboration is the way you innovate. Depending on where you're sitting, you may have different motivations and you may have different goals, whether you're a student or a faculty member or a company. But it's important that these people come together and that in this ecosystem, you have the right incentives and the right motivations and the right rewards to people so that they can share in both the risk and the reward, where they can share in the benefits and the burdens of doing the work. Of course, it helps for people to work together and develop trust, very important. It of course helps to have a few success stories, the unicorns that Professor Mathur was talking about. Of course, all that helps. And of course, IP is a very important part of facilitating this collaboration. Thank you very much. I look forward to a discussion with all of you. And if we have an opportunity for questions, I'm happy to take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kesan, for the wonderful presentation and overview of how the IP scenario under various circumstances is. We have actually received a lot of questions, but I'll take few which are common and cover the central theme of questions which are coming from many corners. So one question that people are asking is, what is the importance of having a research patented in academic institutions? Meaning some faculty members say that it is not so attractive if I'm not having any commercial mindset. So whereas other faculty members, they feel that soon it is found in research, something is found in research, it should be patented. So these are two different perspectives that people in academics have. What is your opinion on that?
So this is very common. It's very typical. In fact, if people did not have these two mindsets, I would be surprised. The point is, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So the point is, the person who says, I don't have a commercial mindset. I just want to develop the technology and I really don't care. That is the limited engagement model that I was talking about, where you go and you get the patent, and then if somebody else is interested in licensing it and they want to run with it, that's fine. They don't want to be involved, and that's perfectly fine. They can go on to work on the next technological project, that's fine. But the university might be interested in the technology, maybe a private company may be interested in the technology, and that particular faculty member, even if they don't want to do it, the patent rights allows some company to come in and take it and run with it. So they don't have to do it themselves. You know, what it does is it makes it attractive for a company to come in and say, okay, I will take this patented technology and I will try to benefit from it. So definitely, even faculty who are not interested in commercializing, they may actually benefit, but they don't have to do it themselves. That's the point. They don't have to do it themselves. Other people might be willing to go and run with their technology. Now, the other set of faculty who are very happy to be very actively involved, you know, that's a different story. Is what I'm saying making sense?
Yeah, of course. So, in fact, why I touch upon this issue is there are a lot of examples, and one example is sitting just next to me, your own friend, Professor Uday Kumar. He worked on improvisation of a motor during his PhD work at IIT Bombay, and later on the technology was used by an automobile giant. He did the same, I would not say mistake, but he took the stand not for patenting that, And now he's also of the same opinion. Should I patent such things or not in future? So I'm sure this dilemma comes in the mind of every faculty member who does some fundamental research. So the next question we have is...
I'll actually tell you, I got a couple of patents from my PhD work. And unbeknownst to me, a couple of years later, the University of Texas at Austin, after I had graduated and gone and I was working for IBM research, subsequently, some company out in Minnesota had actually taken the stuff I had worked on and they started developing technology. And one day, suddenly, I started getting a check. It was small amounts, but I was really happy because they actually took my technology and ran with it. The amount was not important. I was just so happy that somebody was actually doing something. So I think, you know, even the faculty that are not interested might actually, they might enjoy, you know, the joy of seeing their technology being developed and being used. It's much more likely when you try to get patent rights around the technology so that a company might take it and try to run with it, and they know they can get some competitive advantage because somebody else cannot take that. So they're much more willing to do some investing, and they're much more willing to take it to the marketplace.
Okay, thank you. That was a good one. So the next in this series is some faculty members who already have patents with them, they are not able to decide whether to sell a patent through transfer of technology or to license. So how to arrive at this decision, whether they should go for transfer of technology totally, selling the patent, this means, or to have the license given to anybody who's interested.
So it is very difficult to answer that question generally. It really depends on the specific technology and the specific circumstance. So in some situations, it might make sense to give only a license for that particular field that a company is interested in. So imagine, let us say that you have developed a new fingerprint recognition technology. I'm just making something up, some example. That fingerprint recognition technology, computer companies might be interested to use that in the computer pad as a security for your laptop. They might be interested in that. Some other companies might be interested in using the same technology for you to enter your hotel room. So you can see in this kind of situation where there's so many applications, it doesn't make sense to sell the technology because you should license it in every sector because there may be different companies involved. So, you know, you should license the rights to your technology for computer applications to the computer companies, maybe to some companies in the hotel business and hotel chains, you know, so on and so forth. So, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense in that situation to completely sell it. On the other hand, if some company comes along and says, I want to take your patents and I want to start a company and I want to buy all the exclusive rights and I will make you a good deal and let me run with it. You know, if you are well compensated, you know, it might make sense to sell everything. So it really depends on the situations and circumstances. There is no across the board good answer. I will, however, tell you, the fact that somebody is interested in licensing and the fact that somebody wants to buy something, that means you're doing good work. That means somebody is interested in this environment. If somebody is interested in your work, that is fantastic. That is exactly what you want.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Somebody is asking, when we are doing research, there are students who are also working in lab and they are population in transit. So the whole development process is not in front of them, but they know some part of the IP. So how should one handle kind of IP infringement possible with students working in your lab?
So That's a good question. And that's really a policy question for the management. In US universities, when a student works in a lab, then all the work, just like the faculty member, all the work that is done by the student also belongs to the university. So if MNIT faculty and MNIT students are developing technology, then everything is owned by MNIT, including the students' work. And there is a revenue sharing formula. So what that means is that MNIT owns all the IP, but then even if 100 rupees comes in typically in most US universities, 40 to 50% of it is shared with the inventors. So if 100 rupees comes in, then 50 is kept by the university. That 50 is shared with the department and with the university administration in some formula. And the other 50% goes to the professors and goes to the students. So there is a sharing formula. But in order to avoid this problem of where students, their contributions, do they really fall in, do they belong to the faculty? Do they belong to the institute? In order to avoid these kinds of issues, we have a clear, most universities in the US have a clear policy about that. Now, as a practical matter, the students, when they work in a lab, they get some knowledge, they get some training, and what is in their mind, they can take that with them. There's nothing to stop. You cannot stop a student from what they learn and where they go. That's just what it is. However, what the students cannot do is download some 10 gigabytes of code that they wrote and take it with them. That's where the problem comes in. However, all the techniques and everything they've learned in their mind, that's just part of their education. That's the way we deal with it. Maybe that's not the right way to deal with it. Maybe there's some other different models, but you're right. How to properly recognize and incentivize students in addition to the faculty is a very important issue.
Okay. The next one is coming from a startup, and they are saying that one of the biggest risks of losing our IP is when we enter into a discussion with a potential funder, because we have to discuss our idea in a greater length unless he won't be interested in funding. So, and what if this funding opportunity fails and he takes away your idea and shares with somebody else and your IP is gone? So should we have some kind of agreement signed before we sit for a funding pitch, or what is your suggestion for that?
So excellent question. So again, in the US, it's very common to first get your IP. That's first, or at least start the process and make your filings for patents, etc. Number one. Number two, before you start talking to a funder, you file a non-disclosure agreement or a mutual confidentiality agreement, and so that it's very clear that any discussion that is taking place under that mutual confidentiality agreement, and that the information that is given is used only for evaluating the technology and is not going to be used for any other purpose. Having said that, as a practical matter, most people, even after they file even after a confidentiality agreement is signed, they will show the results of the technology. But until there is more progress, They will not show you how they got the results. They are quite careful in how they reveal their cards. They'll show you, yes, we can do this. Yes, we can do that. We can also run some tests for you. So if you want to give us some test samples, we will run some tests for you and we'll show you the results. But we're not going to open everything to you and risk losing everything. So yes, this is a situation that has to be carefully managed. I agree. And especially with the funders, it's not so much of an issue because the funders are, they are not experts in the area. But if a startup is talking to a bigger company in the same area, it becomes a real issue because the bigger company might simply be interested in taking the technology. They really don't want to pay for it. So the funders just want to know, is this worthy? Is this good? So sometimes with funders, you can convince them, please appoint an expert. Please appoint somebody else. Please appoint an expert to look at my technology. Go find some expert and let them evaluate my technology. So that's something that's possible with a funder. But with a larger company in your own field, it becomes more problematic.
And what order of transparency should be there between the management of Incubation Center itself and the startups?
That's again another tough question. A lot of times the startups don't like to share these details. They're worried because they think the Incubation Center management themselves have a conflict of interest with them. You just have to show that you're genuinely interested in their future, you want them to succeed, and that it's really a question of trust. And it's a question of having worked and the companies that have succeeded. Otherwise, you are correct. I mean, there is this perception that some of the management in a innovation or incubation center might itself have some conflicts.
Okay, the last one from you, Professor Jay, before we move on to the panel discussion, and I will ask the moderator of the panel discussion to take up a few questions that are there in the chat box in the panel discussion, if possible. So, Professor Jay Kesan, somebody is asking if a student develops an idea and the technology too, and he files a patent with a supervisor, and then he leaves, and the supervisor continues to work on that idea. Should he be sharing future patents with the originator of the idea or not?
So that's a very good question. But this is a very, very simple and a straightforward issue that the patent system deals with very well. And it's something that the Indian patent system also deals with very well. So what would happen is you would file the first patent and you would have faculty A and student B are co-inventors. And then once that student B is gone and is graduated, the faculty A may continue to do some research with student C and a continuation patent that is based on the first patent can have faculty A and student C listed as inventors. So there's no problem. The first student would be a co-inventor in one patent. The faculty may be involved in both patents, and they may have different students. And depending on the importance of the contribution of the two patents, the revenues may be shared. So the student will not lose out. The student may graduate, but the student will not lose out. Am I making sense?
Yeah, for sure. So I think because of shortage of time, I know there are a lot of questions, but as I said, some of the questions will be put in front of the panel. That is now we are starting. But before that, I must thank Professor Jay Kesan. Thank you very much. Your presentation was par excellence. It was quite interesting, and the question answer session. Thanks to all the participants for giving me some tips for asking questions, and I'm sure we will be benefited by the tips and points that you shared with us. All the participants may note that this recording will also be available after some time. We'll be sharing a link and uploading the recording on MNIT Incubation Centre website. Along with that, we will also have a recording of the panel discussion that comes now. So a special thanks to Professor J. Kesan, because I know it's post midnight for you. It's 12:30 a.m. So thank you very much.
Special hearty thanks, to be with us. And it was a lot of eye openings were there. A lot of misconception was there about IP related to the small industries, even to the students, and of course faculty also. Because earlier faculty were in such a way that only they were focusing on their academic works and get a PhD or a MTech or whatever is required. But now the time is changed that they also should get some royalty or earn as per the norms of whatever rule of the land.
Yes.
That was a good thing.
Good thing is that Ministry of Human Resources has released a startup policy for faculty members, and in India, Higher Education Institute faculty can have their companies. MNIT has already opened up, and I think 3 or 4 of our faculty members have their companies now, and more will come in future. So we move on to the next agenda with once again thanking Professor J. Kesan. I think all the participants will join me in giving a big round of applause. The applause will not be audible.
Thank you.
So,
thank you so much. Once again, I'm really sorry I could not be there in person. That's really my loss. But thank you for the opportunity, and good luck. And I do want to say that in my experience, once the faculty get involved and they see the excitement of people getting jobs, and their technology is contributing economically for the development of the country, I think there will be tremendous excitement. Thank you again.
And you will be my in super advisory board also, MICC.
Thank you.
First for you now, before somebody else take that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.